For the Arnold School in Health Promotion Education Behavior. And I'm a first-year PhD student. This is my second semester acting as a TA. I spend 10 hours a week as a TA and 10 hours a week doing research with my advisor. One of my tips that I learned very quickly during my first semester as a TA was to make sure that I had dedicated hours every week blocked off for my TA responsibilities and not on Friday, but middle part of the week to manage the email load and to manage the assignments. All right, glad to see you guys.
Yeah, thank you all for being here. I'm Garrett. I'm also in the Arnold School of Public Health and Health Promotion, Education, and Behavior, one of the long ones. I'm also 10 hours a week graduate TA assistant and graduate research assistant for the other 10 hours. And my favorite TA tip was learning my instructor of record's preferred mode of communication, what their access wants to be. So I'll pass the torch.
My name is Georgina Anderson. I am a fourth-year PhD candidate, graduating someday, I hope, maybe soon, I don't know. I teach now upper-level biology classes, physiology most recently, but I've taught the 101 level also. My biggest tip is maybe a little bit controversial. My biggest tip is the students that we're working with have so much going on, especially right now with the state of the world, the state of COVID. Try to remember that they are humans too, and while your course is obviously very important, there may, from time to time, be days when other things are more important than your course. And that can be hard for us to remember because, our course is everything to us. Technically, I spend 20 hours a week teaching. I think I average closer to 15. Some weeks it's less, some weeks there's more grading, and then it's over 20. I think my dedicated time probably averages about 15 hours a week.
Thank you. My name is Lily. I'm from hospitality, retail, and sports management in tourism, in HRTM. We don't have, at least me and my advisor, we don't have dedicated like 10 hours and 10 hours. We just kind of wing it. What I do is leading the discussions. So my advisor is teaching on Tuesday. We have Tuesday, Thursday class, and I'm leading it on a discussion about a topic on a Thursday. And my biggest tip was first time I went in, I was nervous because I've taught a class before. I was in front of the class, but it was in my own language in Georgian. And this time was English, and I told everyone, hey, if you don't understand something, please stop me. I want you to be engaged. I want you to get everything that I have to share with you. So, and this is my first time. So I was like very honest about it. And after the class, I got like, oh, I can't believe it was your first class. I was like, well, it was. So my tip will be honest if you're nervous. They will understand, right? We're very close. In a way that we're also students, they're students. We know kind of what we're going through, and showing them that you are there with them, you're experiencing the same things, will be something that you can open with if you're nervous. If you're not, you're a champion.
Aaron online.
Hi everyone, I wish I could see you all. I'm very happy to get to chat with you all today. I'm from the College of Education. I'm in the Educational Leadership and Policy Department. And I am also a PhD candidate. My defense is scheduled for the 14th of this month. So, hopefully I will soon be doctor. We'll see. I'm knock on wood. So I think my tip is I work, so I'm a doc student and I work with master's and doctoral level students. And I loved that tip about they know that we're students also, and that sometimes nervousness is just part of getting your feet wet. And I think that's especially true when you're working with students who are potentially older than you or who are like at that same level potentially as you are. And I think one of my biggest tips that I would share from my experience is just remembering that not all of our students are like us. So everyone is coming from very different walks of life, very different undergraduate experiences, and so finding ways, and I'm a TA for a lot of seminar style classes, and so finding ways to bring out these individuals' lived experiences in the courses and making it really meaningful and personal, and them feeling like they're teaching as much as we are teaching. And I am always just open to learning from my students. And so it's just been a really wonderful, almost collaborative opportunity for me.
Great, thank you so much, and I'm glad that we kind of got to do a bit of introductions. I think we also wanted to share kind of why we wanted to host this TA workshop, maybe is a term for it, just because at this point in our first semester TA, there were kind of questions that you didn't know to ask during orientation and things that maybe have come up or just could use a little bit more discussion. So we want to picture this more as that we're a community of learners. We're all kind of in the same boat. People might have experiences or insights that they want to share that maybe we, the panelists, don't cover, and that's just as valuable, if not more. So with that said, maybe we can get into the first topic that was most requested about grading, and maybe some efficiency tips for that.
Before you get into grading, especially if the answers are short answers or essay questions, have a rubric and make sure you understand what your professor is searching for exactly, and what if it's 5 points, you need to know what deserves 5 points, what deserves 3, and what deserves no credit at all before you will start grading. Otherwise, you will have to go back and make sure that you've been fair to everyone you already graded.
My suggestion for grading is reframing the way you think about grading. So you can approach grading as this miserable chore that you have to do every week, and you hate it, and it's the worst thing, it's the worst part of your grad school experience, and it's a waste of time, and why does anyone ever have to do this? You can approach it that way. That is certainly your right. If we approach grading as this is the opportunity to give students feedback that will make them better at the subject. Students don't learn without feedback. They don't. They can answer all the questions. If they don't know why they got something wrong, they haven't learned anything, really and truly. So if you approach grading as one of the two most important roles as a TA, probably first is delivering content, and then second is giving feedback. Students will not learn without good feedback. So if you can kind of shift your thinking and let grading be this important task that has a huge impact on your students, because it does, it can feel less tedious.
I think that's a great tip, and I love reframing thoughts, so that right up my alley. Mine kind of goes off of that a bit too, in terms of, I think that it's easy to try to providing feedback takes the most time. Commenting on specific sentences that a student wrote or different things like that, and I like to call it a comment bank, and things that kind of you can copy and paste into the feedback to the learner, but it's something that kind of, if it's an issue throughout the whole paper rather than commenting on it every time it comes up, I think saying, this was a repetitive issue, maybe let's meet and talk about it, or we can learn from that as well. But also being able to give feedback that is useful. And I think that is, especially for assignments that are maybe more repetitive in nature, that they're going to be providing or completing similar assignments again in the future. Could you send an email to the entire class with these were common mishaps that the rest of the class found in their papers? And I found that to be very useful, and it starts more conversations with students where I think they realize that other students might have been doing something similar, especially when it comes to maybe citation issues or the way that things are being talked about and defined. And I think that that's a good way to bring course content back in and maybe connect some dots that hadn't been, and it gives you that opportunity. And I'm happy to talk more about that, but I think that full class emails are one of my favorite tools as a TA, so.
Well, I echo a lot of the three Kenla's points, and I'll just start a little bit earlier. So as a TA, I learned that I needed to make sure that instructions were very clear. One of the burdens of being a TA is not just grading, but making sure that students understand the assignments. They're brand new to the course. It's a lot easier as a TA if you're very familiar with the course syllabus and outline, so you know how to explain it the best. And I found that it shaved off just hours and hours of emails and questions.
I think that I wanted to reiterate, someone said earlier, managing time. So if you know that discussion board posts are due this day, or and that's something you can count on, those are going to be hard deadlines, or if a journal entry or whatever is due, don't put it off till the last minute. And I think that's where the reframing can be helpful, so it doesn't feel like such a chore. So I would say that's one piece of it. And then this semester, the seminar that I'm TAing for is a course where there's a lot of flexibility in when students can turn in certain assignments. And of course, we know that what can happen is students do have other lives outside of the classroom. They have plenty of things going on. And so I remind them every week, hey, does anybody have a book review? And this is going out by email. Does anybody have a book review or a film review? Because that's one of their assignments they have to do. And just keeping that on the forefront of their mind, so that I'm not going to get to the end of the semester and I'm going to have their final projects, their reviews, and just those other odds and ends at the very end of the semester. Of course, I don't have complete control over when they decide to turn these assignments in, but I can at least be that person just nudging them, because it's going to be a lot of work for them at the end of the semester, and we're all burnt out at that time anyway. So I think it's both helpful not only for us and our schedules, but also for our students if they have some of those dates that are more flexible, to encourage them to get it done early, get it out of the way early. And then it's up to them, of course, if they're going to make that choice or not.
So I don't know how much you guys call it online, but I was talking about making sure instructions were just clear and that students were aware of expectations and criteria for whatever assignment's done, to shave off the amount of time that you're responding to individual emails or sending out full class emails, as Cameron mentioned. I feel like instructions just sometimes don't always take when they're in the syllabus or on Blackboard, especially in online classes. And I think, like Erin mentioned, having those reminders along with pretty specific instructions also helps students realize how much time they need to afford. It saves you from having extension emails and things like that, because they're a little more on top of what their calendar should look like. I also, with the feedback piece, I come from a psych background originally as a school psychologist, so I like to make sure that I incorporate some of that in my feedback. I feel like students are in a different spot, as we all know, with the pandemic, and I know a lot of us have mentioned that in our comments so far, but I do try to mention a strength of theirs to make sure that we don't seem like we're just picking apart their assignments, and we give them hope about what they've done better since the last assignment, if that's possible for me to track that on an individual basis. And then have overarching sort of objectives for them to meet for the next assignment. So that might look like a reflective question. I might say, hey, this concept was great, but do you mind carrying that forward and critically think about having these two elements sort of processed next time? And I feel like that gives them something to think about rather than just a statement, and makes it sort of more of an engaging interaction, especially for students that don't see us every day through these large online classes, which is, as you can tell, what I'm teaching now. It doesn't take a whole lot of extra effort, and I feel like that makes a little more personalized experience, especially for students that feel disconnected during this sort of turbulent time that they're in college or graduate school. There's other things I use to make my life more efficient. for those of you that were around last semester, Blackboard actually crashed toward the end of the semester. And a lot of us are experiencing trauma still from that. I don't know, I mean, everyone's sort of laughing, but I wasn't laughing. And so I actually this year adopted an Excel sheet approach. So I have a backup on my computer that I also saved to OneDrive as well. So there's sort of a 3-point plan in case that goes down, because that was a lot of extra labor when as a student I had my own coursework to do, and there wasn't really an answer from the instructor because no one had really experienced this before, and there's not sort of a backup plan, and how far is the cloud going to go back to, you know, remember what grades you entered. So I do have an Excel sheet, and I think that it's been really helpful for me because I'm able to look at that when I'm doing grading and sort of see what patterns overall are happening with students in terms of the criteria they're meeting or their grades, or just maybe a student hasn't turned in several assignments in a row and that student needs a check-in email. So it kind of gives me a better sense of sort of what I could do to support them. And also, like Cameron mentioned, I have a comment bank for every assignment that's sort of attached to that Excel sheet, so I have it handy and I can easily grade a little quicker. I feel like I've overstepped with my comments, so I'm going to pass this on down. But I feel like one of the things that a lot of you guys were talking about was efficiency with grading and making sure that your time was used effectively. So I don't know if y'all have other ideas about that you want to share. I'll pass it on down.
I also love the conversation about maybe tools used for grading.
Yes.
One of my favorites is maybe more so tailored to limiting bias in my grading, so I grade with no names visible, and that also helps me stray away from learning student patterns and maybe going into grading with assumptions. So on Blackboard you can grade, you know, with the names hidden when you go to the assignments, and since a lot of my grading is just strictly on Blackboard, that's been immensely useful. But also maybe a tool that goes into time management is I have kind of in my agenda my to-do list assignments that my students are submitting. And now that I'm a TA for the same course again, I have this basic understanding of how long it'll take me to grade certain assignments, which is a privilege of being a TA again for the same class. But nonetheless, for any class, I think it's useful to write in their assignments along with your own schedule, because a lot of us are students as well, and I think that being able to build my own assignments around the grading and the turnaround time that I hope to have for my students, my rule of thumb is as long as they had to turn it in, I have to turn it back around to them. And that's kind of an understanding with my instructor as well, but building it in so I can see it coming up, I think, is the biggest thing, because I don't like when big assignments are a surprise for me to grade, which can happen, especially towards the end of the semester. But
I think consistency is super important. If you have a student who has some sort of situation and you decide to give them an extension on an assignment, they all talk to each other. You have to be very clear about what are the circumstances where you'll be giving an extension, or what is the penalty for X, Y, and Z, and you really have to be clear about how that gets applied. Or have a no penalty for late work policy, and then you don't have to worry about what situations are going on. Your students are going to talk to each other, and if you give leeway to one or two, it can get messy if you're not willing to apply it across the board. So before the semester starts, this is more of a syllabus or a first day type discussion to have with your students. Make it very clear what grace you're able and willing to give students and what will have a consistent penalty in your class for the entire semester.
I'll just comment on a few things that what you said remind me of advices or examples that I got, because I don't really have much of a say on a grading right now. So like one of the things that you mentioned, reminding them about your assignment is coming up, right? So I've seen like very great example how syllabus can be done in a way that except assignment and a date, this is a time when you should start working on the assignment that is due in 3 weeks. So it's kind of not only tells you when it's to do, but also tells you you're gonna need 2-3 weeks to do this. And sometimes people don't know how long the assignment will take, and it comes with we should not forget that we've been in a system for a long time. We've been students for bachelor's, for master's, now we're doing PhD, and we kind of know when we're reading assignment. That's not always the case with the students that we're teaching if they're undergrads, right? Like I'm taking one of the classes as a student where I started working on a homework like week ago, and it took me 2 days, and like my teammates started working a day before, and they rushed to finish it and like went like spend all night doing it. So that is because the class doesn't tell you how long it will take. So it's a homework. How long can it take, right? So when it's a big homework, when it's a big assignment, it's always good to, yes, verbally tell them, also put it in a syllabus, like put it in every possible place where they will look. Because some people, I always liked following a syllabus since undergrad, but there are people who never open the syllabus, right? They just go with the flow, right? So we have to care to all of them if we want to achieve a goal of sharing the knowledge we have and helping them. That's our role. So yeah, that's one of like very good things that I saw. And treating them all equal, absolutely. You cannot just, you either give exceptions to everyone or no one, right? So yes, there are situations that if there is a situation that you can only give a exception to one person, and that was that unique of a situation, like the others will know as well, right? But if it's just I couldn't make it, so give me an exception, then everyone should get that. So I agree with everything you said.
Oh, I wanted to agree. I actually dealt with that situation this morning where I had to make that hard call. And sometimes you do have to make those hard calls and say, you have missed this class. This week there is this due, and just sometimes you have to have those difficult conversations with students, and so do be prepared for that. And so that I wanted to comment on that, and then I also wanted to mention, be familiar with your campus resources, and if you can share things either in the syllabus or in class, absolutely do that, because we as TAs do have other responsibilities. We are not the only person who can help these students succeed. So making sure that you are familiar with campus resources, when you may need to contact the BIT team, when you may just need to recommend a visit to the writing center. Maybe students are not familiar with campus databases or citation managers that can help make their lives easier. So I think some of those tools, and either including those in the syllabus if you have access to that, or being able to share that with students. If you have some flexibility in building the schedule, sometimes you can build in modules or things on that. I know so I was involved in planning the syllabus for the class that I'm TAing for this semester, but I know everybody has sort of different, some may be given a prescribed syllabus, but where there is that flexibility, being able to recommend campus services to students, a very good thing, because even if they've been here since freshman and went through the first year experience courses, sometimes they need to hear things 2 or 3 times, or just they may not be familiar with those resources the way that we have been through the system since our bachelor's.
As a comment following up from that, when we should be lenient, since the students have other things going on, how lenient can we be if we should be sticking to an all or nothing for exception mentality? I teach a freshman bio lab, and I can definitely see the stress that all of them have.
I know bio lab.
Yeah.
So there's some big differences in the classes with biology. Freshman labs have up to 24 sections versus this is the only class that meets this semester for this course on campus. So that makes a big difference. When there are many sections of a course, then you need the added layer of being consistent between TAs, between days that the class is taught. And that's where the lab coordinators for the 101 and 102 labs are so important. In those classes, working with the freshmen, I think there's less flexibility with due dates and when assignments can be turned in, and a more prescribed list of when points need to come off. And that really needs to be followed in order to be consistent class to class. What you can do is you can offer your students understanding. If you know someone is struggling, you can send them an email a couple days before the first lab report is due and make sure that they have the resources they need. It could be a quick email to the entire class. It doesn't have to single anyone out. When your students know that you care about them and about their success, sometimes that's all the grace they need to understand this course has certain consequences for certain days late, for certain missed assignments, or for certain absences.
I can share my advisor's principle on it, that he gives a chance to everyone who struggles. He cares, like, thing is, we should care about what we do and we should care about the students, right? If someone, it's kind of trust relationship, and it's up to us how we, like, it up to us as a people how we feel about it. Like, I personally trust everyone until I can't, and that's like, and that is a very long way. Like, you should do something very bad so I will lose the trust, but then you cannot get it back, right? So, and that's me as a person. So for me, comfortable thing to do is I'll trust you that if you're coming to me and saying, you know, I'm struggling with something, first I want to be approachable, so you can tell me that, and the second, I want to help you. And that's what my advisor is doing as well. Like, yes, he's giving exceptions from, like, he gives some students who need that additional time or additional assignment, or just talks to them after the class. Is there anything else we can do to help you out? And yes, some students may use it for their benefit, but then that's not a reason to, I don't know, it's, discriminate is not a word, but it's not a reason to not give a chance to ones who are actually struggling, right? Because life is happening, right? And because, you know, everyone knows this, like, oh, before the exams, my grandmother died, my grandfather died, right? Like, it's a big joke, but when I personally had that happening, I missed the class because my grandmother actually died. And when I tell that to a professor, her reaction was uh-huh, and continued. That was very painful. Yes, people lie about it, but when people don't, that's very harmful, right? So yes, maybe you freshman and first year, we need to, like, put them in a, like, there are different situations, of course. Like, when we need to be strict, we need to teach them how to be in a line, how to meet dates, due dates, but we also should make sure that we're there if they need help, right? So that's my comment on that.
Something that might be useful if you feel like you have less flexibility in what grace you can offer to students, you can encourage your students to talk to you before the deadline is missed, before the class is missed. Instructors of record are a lot more likely to give leniency if they know in advance. So if you're teaching a course where there are 20 sections of it, like Bio 101 or 102, if a student is having something going on, a family thing, a health thing, whatever it may be, if you can give your instructor of record, your lab coordinator, a heads up about that early, then if they need some sort of accommodation down the line, your instructor of record is probably going to be more likely to consider that and listen to your suggestion of what to do with that student.
I think that was a great discussion, and I want to open the floor up. I don't know if before we maybe move on to another topic, is there anything else anyone wants to bring up about grading or any specific questions about it?
I just also wanted to say that this is another reason to be familiar with campus resources, both for yourself and for students, because sometimes we see patterns of behavior with certain students, and it can be helpful sometimes. Some of those behaviors are typically indicative of a problem that may be out of our purview to handle. And I think especially being in a class that has so many sections, and I'm teaching as special topics this semester. So I think it's an entirely different situation from where you are probably needing to adhere to a fairly strict set syllabus. And so I would say, just again, that's where our campus resources are so important.
I think the segue is good into communication with students, if y'all want to start talking about that.
I'm working as a TA for an online class, as I mentioned before, and I established really early in the semester just an open invitation to connect with me outside of office hours through email or through the students' preferred method, to make sure that I was available for them, because again, this is a distance learning class or online class, and I don't know how they're coming into this semester, but a lot of us are just sort of tired of the pandemic and the rules and the uncertainty of life. And I wanted to make sure that I was approachable, as you mentioned before, and that they knew that I really meant it. And so we started the semester a little bit rocky with some of the students, and they were a larger percentage that I anticipated that didn't participate in just introducing themselves in a discussion forum to the class. So I individually wrote emails to all those students, a little copy and pasting there, but making sure that they knew that they were missed, and that that we wanted their participation, and to remind them that they weren't going to be part of the class, that they forgot to drop it, and they're still on my roster. So all those things being in play, and I received so many emails really thanking me for having that connection and making sure that that they were in the right section and spot, and they did want to continue with the class that semester. And then through that, we've gotten emails as a group, the other TA and I and the instructor, that have been a lot more open, and we've had several students that have been more forward with the struggles that they're having, and it is an honor as a TA to validate where they are and to really receive some of their comments and life stories about what's happening, whether it's truly a grandparent passing, or that they've just been in sort of this stretch of time as a young adult and they don't know how to manage it, and using some of the campus resources, as Erin mentioned, and making sure that there's sort of a wraparound services where I am in a TA role, but here's what all the University of South Carolina offers, and even beyond that. So, but one of the things I really felt good about this semester is just emphasizing that, I hear what you're saying, and we are all, sort of in this together, and we want you to do very well. And I think that sort of builds, a rapport that is sometimes difficult to do with sort of that transactional experience when you have a large class or there's not a lot of personal contact. So that communication, again, is established early, and then recently, sort of this halfway mark, roughly in the semester, I reached out to students who also weren't participating, and that's a huge part of their grade. And again, there's a lot of emails flurrying in about what's going on and why I'm doing that, and it's just an opportunity to sort of make sure that they're doing well as humans. And this class is important, but it is not the only thing and not the only course, and doesn't doesn't offer a significant mark on how they're doing in life. And so that broader perspective has sort of helped me as I've been a student and sitting in their shoes and making sure that they do have, someone on the other end that's looking out for their well-being. So that's been sort of my objective this semester with communication, beyond just, answering questions about assignments and so forth.
I think that's great. I think I'm going to take that tip myself. I might separate my comment into online courses and in-person courses. So in my experience with online classes, especially asynchronous, I really appreciate that my instructor of record included and encouraged me to include a mini bio about myself and a picture on a class where they watch modules online and have very little, face-to-face contact with us as a teaching team. And I think that that just kind of pulls down the curtain a little bit to let them know that we are real people. These are our names and beyond the syllabus and who we are. And also in part of my responsibilities are sending out these weekly emails just to maintain contact and make sure responsibilities are known for the class and what we're covering. And I've noticed that when I sign my emails off with, as always, let me know if you have any questions, or let me know if you want to meet to discuss course content, because office hours aren't necessarily a main responsibility that I have in my course, but I've found that when I have that little tagline at the bottom of emails, even if it's to one individual student or the class, I do get responses, and I've been able to meet with students one-on-one to continue the conversation of things that we talked about in class, because in this asynchronous format, there's less opportunity for discussion, and I think they were looking for an outlet for that, and I think that it continues the learning a little bit further than if it had just ended there. So online, I think that there are opportunities to open the door where it might just take a little bit more effort, but I think it is worth it to keep that learning engaged and let students know that you're involved and present. And that also kind of maybe brings up a question about boundaries with responding to emails and things, but 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. I don't know what your style is. But I also kind of in the in-person realm, which has been something that we navigate with hybrid and different things. But I found that the courses where I've had the best connections with students are ones where the class doesn't start immediately with content, maybe even just preparing a little quip or something to, connect with students on. Or I had a professor I loved, always started the conversation with asking for restaurant recommendations in the city, especially for freshman courses, things to help them get to know their community, or ways to integrate themselves outside of the classroom as well. And even as Aaron's brought up, asking students what their favorite resources on campus are, and USC does have a great writing center. But in addition to that, I think being in person and being present, if your schedule allows, a little bit before and a little bit after class, and once the class is wrapped up, saying, I'll stick around if anybody wants to chat or if anybody has any questions. I think that opens the communication where students that might be more hesitant to approach you have the space and are able to without, the class as an audience. So that's where I stand in person and online. Happy to talk about both, but
I think I need to tell kind of the other perspective here. So the panelists who are here today are here because we love teaching, and this is something that we have intentionally spent a lot of time doing and developing. Other TAs may teach as a responsibility of being a grad student, and it may not be the focus of their experience in grad school. That's fine. That is okay. It is very possible to hear students and see students and build connections with them, but also keep a stronger boundary of professionalism, if that's what you're more comfortable with. So if a student is telling you something, it is absolutely fine to say, I hear you, that sounds like a very difficult situation. Here's the phone number of counseling on campus. Here's the 741-741 text. This is a free crisis line to text with. Who is your academic advisor? I'm going to send them an email to touch base with you. And that can be the end of the conversation. You are not expected to be a therapist to your students.
Yes, I think my perspective, I have TA'd in classes that were a part of my master's program, very tight-knit community. And then again, when I'm TAing, and of course, obviously I'm working with a faculty member because I don't have the academic credentials yet to TA on my own doc classes, or that are classes that are open to doctoral students. Sometimes those classes are in cohorts that are above or below mine. So for me, maintaining professionalism and personal boundaries and being very cognizant of the time that I'm putting into teaching, because I also have research that I'm doing. I have other projects going on. I have an NEH grant project going on right now. I have a project going on with special collections, and I'm defending my dissertation in a few days.
Oh my
So
gosh.
I will definitely say I do try to be caring. I try to be present for my students when I'm in that space. But I am also not someone who is going to talk through text at all hours with my students. I know some instructors share phone numbers. If you have an office phone, that's great. I don't. I mean, there is an office phone, but it's not hooked up. And it is perfectly okay, and it is healthy for you, because we're all going through the pandemic as well. We have, potentially you are teaching up to 25 hours a week. That's it. If you want to do more than that, that is great, but don't forget to take care of yourself first, because that's going to make you a better instructor at the end of the day for your students. And I think some of us who do love teaching so much, because I love it, I do love it. I just also have to keep graduation in mind. I'm doing the Preparing Future Faculty certificate. We all just have these other things that are going on, and teaching can take over your life. I mean, you could spend 30, 40, 50 hours just on your teaching. So I think just finding where those commitments are, sharing them with your students, because boundaries are good for them to learn as well. And sometimes the first time you're kind of coming up against this, like, oh, you're not available to me 24/7. And that's sort of what I'm used to because of Snapchat and things like that. So I think it's healthy for them to sometimes see someone exercising boundaries, because sometimes that's the first time they're sort of encountering that in their own lives. And so you can really be a role model who is kind and caring and does all of these things and really invests the time that you have in your teaching. And also, we're still students and we still have these other things going on. And so it's that personal balance that you have to find for yourself, but protect your time and yourselves.
Absolutely, Erin. All these were amazing advices. I will just add two things. One, make sure the students you're teaching know what office hours mean. And I come from a different country. We don't have office hours. Professors there either come early or leave late, but that's it. It's not a full professor. And people can have different backgrounds. They might be the first generation. Like there might be a lot of different things why they don't know what office hours are. So make sure they know it's not just a time when you work, but it's a time when you're open, when your doors are open for them, right? And second, be there early and leave late, because some people just don't feel comfortable asking questions in the middle of the class. It also gives you opportunity to catch small details when they walk in, like a compliment on your shoes. Like I'm very big. I love colorful shoes. I always compliment colorful shoes. So like they're professional today. And when I see them, like I have tons of colorful shoes, and when I see them, I'm like I connect with the person, so like commenting on them, and that kind of creates a connection. Like my advisor just commented on someone. They started talking on something. I was like, what? How is that conversation about some kind of sport? I don't even know. And apparently he was wearing a baseball cap that had a logo on it. So the guy started talking to him, and that started the conversation in the class before the class time. And kind of like they started talking, so then conversation about a topic was easier. So getting there early, one, gets you more prepared because your slides are definitely working and everything is working how they should. And it also gives you this one-on-one time that you can use. And then staying late just lets people come up to you and talk to you. So absolutely, those like two very simple things, but we should just remember people are from different backgrounds and we should be available for all of them.
This brings up a good conversation, I think maybe transitioning to expectations of us as TAs and maybe expectations that we have of students and maybe how we, set those up for ourselves. I can start with just my favorite tip. I think the midpoint in the semester is the perfect time to bring this up. And I've done this in the past with instructors of record, and it's touching base at this point where you check in, maybe ask for mid-semester feedback. It doesn't have to be a meeting that you have one-on-one. It could be an email. Is there anything I'm missing? Anything that I'm doing well? I mean, you can choose how you phrase that question. But my biggest learning opportunities have come from that kind of mid-semester feedback where I then have time to improve. And I think that the end of the semester feedback is very useful as well, especially what we get from students and our instructor. But I think having the time to improve has been essential for kind of my development as a TA and seeing what students need from me as well. So I encourage everybody, if you can, to take that on, but also maybe balancing how much effort that might take from your instructor, which I think an email is very manageable.
What about, I know that just as TA program manager, I get a lot of questions about how to manage conflicts and dealing with student behavior because everyone thinks that it's going to be hell the first day you step in and it's going to always be that way, which it's not. But what types of situations have y'all had and how do y'all manage different types of situations?
Can I? So again, comes from what we're comfortable with at the beginning. So if you don't want them to be on a computer, make sure to tell them at the beginning. I want all the devices to be put away. If you're comfortable for them to be on a computer, you cannot then, like during the class, if they're on a computer, you cannot question what they're doing. Like you gave them, you should say like, I want you to be engaged. You should tell them that you're expecting them to talk if that's what you want. And after the expectations are set, you cannot then like get upset if they're meeting expectations the way they understood it, you made it clear, right? And then talk in a way, and that was the first day at the university here. The head of the city was like, made just a quiet pause. And everyone who was not looking looked up. So there are techniques you can use. You don't need to point out. You don't need to say I see you on a phone. You don't need to make a big deal out of it, because when you're stopping and saying I see someone on a phone, I don't want phones out. Like you're just wasted few seconds of some other students' time. Just getting quiet for a second, you will get attention. Then don't talk with it doesn't matter how interesting your topic is. If your tone is monotonous, it never changes, the even best students will fall asleep. I know that there are students who won't pay attention. I know that a lot of it is on the students, but a lot of it is on us as well. We should plan the way we want our classes to go. We should plan with or without technology. We should plan with someone not falling asleep. And if someone is falling asleep because it's not boring, but because there is something else, as Erin mentioned a few times, we should get different help from different departments. But just plan, make clear what your expectations are. And if something is not met, try to see what's your side and then what's student's side. One more very good advice I've gotten from one of the CTA workshops is it's not about you. If someone is being aggressive, if someone is being rude, it's not about you. It's not about you as the instructor. It can be that they had a very bad day. It was just a snap without them being able to control it. Maybe that's the way they talk in their family. You don't know what could be a reason, but it's not you. You cannot take it personally. It's not personal offense. They're not attacking you. there's something going on that can be understood through a conversation, through an email, maybe that's a cry for help. So think about all that first, and then maybe like 0.01% chance that they're attacking you personally, right? Like in any other situation, there are solutions for that. So that would be, and attend CT workshops. They're an amazing resource. Absolutely. Like I don't know. I think I'm on a third certificate line already, but they're amazing resource. We can talk all day. We cannot give you as much as those workshops will give you.
I've observed that, generally speaking, if the instructor, the TA, approaches the class in a respectful way, disruptions are really, really rare. They do happen though, and a lot of times it's about grades or about points or about absences. If a student is confrontational with you, I really recommend that after the situation is over, after the class is over, you send an email to that student and copy your instructor of record or the lab coordinator, whoever it is that you would report to, and summarize the situation. Now, Lolly, we had a disagreement in class about your grade. I understand your point of view that this should be an excused absence. However, according to the syllabus, it's not an excused absence. This situation still feels unresolved. If you'd like to have a meeting about this with me and the instructor of record, please let us know. And that way it's documented. If you have a situation, it's always better to let your supervisor, your instructor of record know before it's out of control. Get them in the loop when it's a small thing. And then if it goes nowhere, if, fine, I'll take the 0 for the worksheet, whatever, then it's over, but you've protected yourself if it does get bigger.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for saying that. Because we do have an Office of Student Conduct on campus, and we do have the BIT team, and we have these services in place for a reason. And of course, you're hoping that things are never going to go that far, but protecting yourself is important, and also making sure that that student is going to get the help that they need. Because as the previous person mentioned, a lot of times there may be other things going on as well that have just caused that snap moment. So I'm going to keep advocating. I mean, I'm a graduate of higher ed and student affairs as my first master's, so that's why I'm like, oh, student services, yes, they're wonderful and glorious. And I think additionally, one of the things I love to do, and again, this is going to be, do you have time to fit this into your syllabus, is I love to come up with a code of conduct, or just how are we going to treat each other in the classroom. And so coming up with that with the students, in addition to, of course, what's in the syllabus that you're copying and pasting from just the university's Carolina Creed and things like that. It helps the students to feel like they're part of that process of creating the community, and they have made these rules in conjunction with you, and they're responsible to one another to then maintain that environment. And I found that that's especially helpful because when you're working with students who are at the master's or doc level especially, you're not just delivering content, you're also asking them to read, process, work potentially in pairs or in groups, and then teach their classmates. And so it's very important to have that tone set for that respect and care that they're going to show to one another. I also think that you never want to lose a student. You never want a student to fail. You don't want a student to drop out of your class. And for our master's program and then our doctoral program, you can only get one C. And sometimes if the final grade, I was a TA for a finance class, that was an online exam. I mean, there were some short answer questions, but a lot of that we were asking them. There's, one right answer to some of these budget questions. So sometimes you get to the end of the semester and it's that last assignment that kind of makes or breaks it for a student. And even if you have been contacting them, reaching out throughout the semester, and their participation has been somewhat spotty, I think that can be a really hard time the first time that you have that happen. And again, just don't take that all on yourself, because we all do have other things going on. And sometimes, I mean, I've had students miss their final exams, and we're talking upper level students. And then it may be the case that there was a huge family emergency going on, and there's something that potentially you could discuss with the instructor of record, but just recognizing that's going to be the exception rather than the rule, hopefully. But sometimes those things do come up. So again, just taking care of yourself and finding ways to process and work through when you feel like, man, I'm going to take this all onto myself now because I am a caring person, or things like that. And so, just use that to move forward in your teaching and assess definitely what could I do differently. Maybe it's sending that mid-semester email, or maybe it's changing questions on an assignment if you can do that. But just finding ways to navigate, and just don't beat yourself up, because this is a learning experience for us as well. And you are going to learn and grow, and your students are going to learn and grow together. But there will be probably some of those really tough moments.
Great. And Lolly, I'm so glad that you brought up the CTE courses, because give credit where credit's due. My response is fully from attending the disruptions. I forget the name of the exact.
Fostering proactive learning environment.
Yes,
Yeah.
and also that you don't have to be earning the certificate. You can kind of pick and choose which courses you want to attend based on kind of things you've experienced. But my main takeaway, and I loved that that seminar, was that the nature of disruptions is they're unexpected, and you can anticipate for them, and that's kind of your biggest tool in managing disruptions, especially I think what you can anticipate based on the format of your class. If it's largely seminar discussion based, how then can in the beginning of the semester, or even in the midpoint of the semester, I don't think it's too late to create kind of and reinforce that culture of respect within your classroom, and kind of revisit maybe if you had done it in the beginning of the semester. Not necessarily pointing out specific instances that have happened, but how can you prepare for things that might come up in your course. And I think that that's been very valuable for myself. And even when we were on Zoom, specifically, changing the rules of the Zoom chat. It's not necessarily a place to send, stream of consciousness, but questions for the class. And then eventually, do you need to make it so that the chat is only used to send questions to the professor? And I think that there are different ways to manage disruptions within the class, but you don't want the disruptions to then take away from the other students' learning, which I think was a great note about taking the time to address phones in class as well, because that's a personal choice for the student to be taking that impacts their own learning. But I highly recommend that seminar. I think that remembering that all you can do is anticipate and come, prepared with maybe your response or the teaching team's response, but just giving yourself the grace that those things are unexpected and they do pop up.
That's dealing with a classroom disruption.
Yes,
So
yes,
yeah.
that's it.
So I come from a behavior background, and I just wanted to remind everyone that, student disruptions is a form of communication by that student. And I don't mean to come from a therapist background, but I am one. And so, but I think that that's a good tool to just sort of see what student patterns look like. And if you need to have a sidebar conversation with them before or after class, make it super casual if you can. Know that like as Lolly said, don't take it personal. And if you're in a situation where you feel like it's spiraling, just take a deep breath and try to act like an observer, that you're watching that student do that. It's not about you. You're the only thing that you control is really your reaction. And I feel like having that expectation that was mentioned earlier, at the beginning of your course and the reminders whenever necessary to the full class without distracting away from instructional time makes sense. And I'll just give a shout out to one of my instructors from last semester. It was my very first class as a PhD student, and the instructor's name was Lucy Ingram. She's in the HPEB department and is pretty amazing in both her research and just personally, just a dynamic professor. And I have, this is my second doctoral program, and I'd never had a course instructor that actually established expectations as well as she did. So she wrote on the whiteboard with our cohort, which is, 10, 12 individuals, what expectations we had for each other, and that was the start. So what do you expect your classmates to offer to you? And we offered maybe 8 to 10, different tenets, whether it be respectful communication or a non-judgmental, things like that, because the course was pretty heavy content about, structural determinants of health, and that gets pretty involved. And I think she was making sure that we could all handle that in the course of the class. And then we talked about our expectations for her as a professor, or which could be us as a TA. What those expectations look like, whether it be the number of, the response time or emails, or what feedback might look like. And it really was generative, and we all agreed on it. And then she offered her expectations for us as students, which allowed us to be fully aware of what we were looking for. But the best part about that was not just that we knew exactly what those expectations were, but that at the end, our very last class, we reviewed that. She pulled up pictures of those expectations on the PowerPoint and asked us individually if we maintained those to each other and reciprocally to the professor. And I thought that was a really nice wrap up. I think that established structure to the class. We learned how to be professional students. It gave us agency, and I just really appreciated that. So I feel like as a TA, I think we could establish some of that on a number of different levels, with permission from your instructor of record. But I think that's a great way of sort of offering a framework of what that semester might look like and what your expectations are, and just a general sense of what we can do to sort of create a culture of a good classroom experience as a TA.
Do you have any questions on these topics that we've talked so far, online people, or here in class or in person?
Actually, I want to ask about grading. I am going to grade a lab which has different groups, 2 to 5 members in each group. So the thing is that we don't know in group which person has worked well and which has not. But at the end, you are getting group results. So I want to ask, and I want to learn from your experience. If you have such kind of situation, how you are going to grade them as a group?
As I'm holding a mic, I'll start. I don't know how much you can change and affect that now, but peer evaluations in a group work is a great way to figure it out, to who's working. So peer evaluations, you're just telling group members to evaluate each other, how much work they've done. And what usually happens, they just call out the free rider. They don't usually say like, oh, this person did 90%, this person did 70%. They either say this person worked or didn't work. So that can be a good resource. And if you do it early enough, like I don't know how the labs work, but if you have a class where there's a few projects coming up during the semester, if you'll start from the first project, that free rider, someone who didn't work, will have a time to improve. So the feedback will help them as well from this peer review. So that can be one way to deal with a group work free riders and not enough contribution to a group work.
I came to the conclusion somewhere around my 6th year of teaching high school that I will never grade group work by the group. There's no fair way to do it. If your instructor of record is requiring you to grade it that way, I would go to them and say, what are your expectations for doing this? And let them make the call. my students work in groups and they turn in work individually. If it truly is a collaborative group thing, I'll give a reflection that's graded, and each person can summarize the main points of the project, tell about their contributions to the project, and some other questions. Usually I can figure out from that if somebody just kind of went along with the group and actually didn't contribute. But that's a really tricky situation, and I would kick it to the person of the higher pay grade. I would not touch that as a TA.
I'll just add one thing, not from my experience as a TA, but my experience as a student. Group work can be frustrating, and the best way I've seen it addressed in my time as a student was the clear expectation from the beginning, and if, you know, the people above you agree, could be implemented now, but is rather than assigning percentages of effort or kind of percentages of who completed what, it's listing out kind of which portions of the assignment were completed by which student. If there's a title page, you know, author contributions, I think is a great tool. So then students know going in that they're expected to list everything they did, and if someone has 10 things versus someone with one thing, you know, it's very clear to the professor, and you can't make that up. But also then taking this idea of author contributions and going into, sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. But I think that that's been extremely useful, and opening the door that it's not going to hurt the individual's grade. That is, you know, I think that there's some difficulties with group work and animosity, and students compare grades. It happens. And so when that starts happening, I think that people can get a feel for who's downgrading other students, and that can kind of lead to differing relations within the classroom. And I think that that's something that I think we have to work to manage. But I like the idea of students knowing that they have to be upfront with their contributions, and so that I caught my thought. It's assigning sections, and so that the students that are putting in the effort aren't responsible if another student doesn't complete their section. So rather than having the entire group responsible, and I know that as TAs that's a little bit difficult for us in the middle of a semester, but maybe the next semester, but saying, you know, one student takes the introduction, one student takes the results, and then if you turn in an assignment without results, it doesn't impact your grade because that was one student's responsibility. And I've really appreciated that, because then we decide within the group who's responsible for what, and it doesn't require extra effort on the students that is unnecessary and unfair to them.
I just wanted to say yes with the expectations. I think that's where rubrics are so important, because you can very clearly outline what expectations there are within a rubric. And when students do end up inevitably potentially comparing grades, that expectation was set from the start in the rubric. And I'm someone who's like, I am a fan of group work, which I know is probably not everyone's cup of tea. But I do think it's important there are soft skills that are developed in that way. Potentially, if you're working on the syllabus, the weight of group work may not be enough to make or break a grade. So those students who are very grade focused, which I think is just an issue that we have in higher ed in general, but because then it can take some of the joy out of the group work and the skills that you can learn. So that's something to consider. And then additionally, like this is a life skill. Students are going to be working in teams. If they're going to go on and become academics like us, they're going to be working on research teams. And there's very little work that is not collaborative. So I think it is important to bring that into the classroom. And I'll just reiterate once more, rubrics and considering the weight of the grade of group work to the overall ability for a student who is very aid focused to still potentially be able to achieve that outside of group work.
And I'll echo that. This semester, we have one large project in the class I'm TAing for, and we require a plan that is a sort of a loose outline, but every student and what they're required to do is listed out, much to the echoing of the recommendations. It also shows me that all the group members have been in contact, so that emails start coming in about like, we can't find someone, or the group member is not interacting with us. And those problems sort of surface well before the assignment is due, so there's no rush to completion. And then there is a participation component where each student does sort of say, so-and-so did what they're supposed to do. And if we get that feedback back that doesn't look like that happened, the grade is definitely weighted differently, but there's no penalty for the assignment because we know what that student was responsible for. So those fail-safes, I think, make students more comfortable and less anxious.